People are eating in the car, in traffic, on the way to work. They're, rushing to that first meeting. Typically, the thought of trying to figure out, well, what would I bring as a snack? Like a morning snack is kind of laughable. You're dropping your children off at school, you're getting to work, you're on sort of this treadmill of meeting after meeting after meeting. And then, as soon as work's over, you're picking up your children, you're bringing them to their practices, you're getting home, and then all of a sudden everybody's staring at you. What is for dinner, Mom? And, that leaves very little time for eating, much less eating something healthy. So a huge philosophy of ours is just focusing on one thing at a time, getting a system in place and creating a habit, and then going to the next thing.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions Podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrada Gore. This is episode 80, and my guests are Leslie Schall and Susana Hill. They are former strategy consultants who are the founders of the Wellworks Project, a company that offers wellness coaching to busy individuals like parents and working professionals. They have loads of experience helping busy people like you and me learn how to improve their diet and create new habits. They are young moms, so they know how challenging change can be and how busy we all can get. I love how they remind us that our health is really a work in progress. Before we begin, we want to thank our sponsors. Wise Traditions is supported in part by Just Thrive Probiotic and Antioxidant, the probiotic everyone's talking about. Go to thriveprobiotic.com. And Nutrends Publishing, home of nourishing traditions and other amazing books on diet and health. Go to nutrendspublishing.com. Welcome to Wise Traditions.
Hi, Hilda. Thanks for having us. This is Susana.
Hi, Hilda. This is Leslie. It's so great to be with you.
Hey, well, before we got started, Leslie, I think you were telling me about a client named Jessie that you were excited about the progress she'd made. Tell our listeners about her.
Yeah, we love working with Jessie. She's such an inspiration to us. She grew up and had literally never eaten a vegetable or a fruit, and also no nutrient-dense food. And the only actually fruit that she had was an apple. And in her adult years, she ended up having weight loss surgery and really just struggled. And for her family, what they would do is they would shop. So she's a mom and she works really hard, and so does her husband. And they would shop a month out. So they would get all of their food ahead of time. And then was a lot of canned food and packaged food. And so, of course, she wasn't eating the nutrient-dense way. Mm-hmm. But when we started working with her, what she had on her side and why we love her so much as a client is she was so great at planning ahead, which is, imagine you'd have to plan ahead in order to shop a month out. You have to really think far in advance. So she took those tools of planning ahead and really put them into practice. And within months, she has made so many changes. She's literally shopping at farmers markets and asking them questions. And she switched over from packaged food to fresh food. And we think the reason she's able to do so many changes so quickly is because of her really great planning skills.
Wow, what a story. It sounds like she really went from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, she's such an inspiration to us. We love to hear her latest updates and how well she's doing.
Well, so this is probably why you started your business, right? To help people move from point A to point B?
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely what inspired us. Leslie and I met. We were co-workers in a strategy consulting firm in Washington, D.C. together for about 10 years. And we, spent a lot of time talking about work, but whenever we had time away, we would sneak off for lunch or hang out at the water cooler. And we would always talk about eating healthy food and how important that was to us and places where we'd get good meat and dairy and things like that. And we both really bonded over the fact that while we really cared about our careers and wanted to move up in the company, we wanted to prioritize our health. And so that was really what got us going. Was we saw that you could move up in your career, you could have success and be healthy, but it's really hard. And the people who were able to do that had to plan ahead. They had to be organized. And that's what really made the difference.
Wow. It just sounds like I can imagine this. I used to work in a governmental building and it was fluorescent lights, people stressed out, working really hard, not getting outside at all, grabbing lunch only at what do they call it when you have lunch at your desk? Al desco or whatever, instead of al fresco. And it was a tough life and very unhealthy. So it sounds like you were experiencing that, but you were looking around and seeing the same thing.
Yeah. And I think for us, we know that people can't decide to be healthy and just quit their jobs and not go to their office anymore. That's not realistic, but we realize that there are things you can do to make changes, like plan ahead your healthy meals and bring your lunch or, pack your healthy snacks, taking breaks to get walks. There's lots of things that we can help our clients do. And that's why we've really gotten focused in the corporate environment, because we've been there. We know what a downer that can be. But it doesn't have to be all bad. And we're also realistic. People need to go to work. They need to get paid. They need their job. So we're not saying, quit your job and get outside. We're saying plan ahead. Here's some really tactical, practical things that you can do every day to still be healthy, even while you're climbing that corporate ladder.
Remind me of what a day in that world looks like.
Oh, gosh. Well, you start out in the morning and typically, it's hard to even get out the door. For many people, they don't eat breakfast. The idea of sitting down to a breakfast with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and relaxing is just non-existent. I mean, people are eating in the car, in traffic, on the way to work. They're, rushing to that first meeting. Typically, the thought of trying to figure out, what would I bring as a snack? Like a morning snack is kind of laughable. You're dropping your children off at school. You're getting to work. You're on sort of this treadmill of meeting after meeting after meeting. And then, as soon as work's over, you're picking up your children. You're bringing them to their practices. You're getting home. And then all of a sudden, everybody's staring at you. What is for dinner, Mom? Or Dad? And, that leaves very little time for eating, much less eating something healthy. And when we think about the opposite, if you ask somebody, like, close your eyes and think about what's healthy, we always think of ourselves like walking on a beach somewhere and, in the sunshine. It's never, like you said, Hilda, under the fluorescent lights in a workday or in a conference room stuck with, like, some crummy sandwiches and cookies that were provided. And we really wanted to bring that vision of health to the workplace because we know that that's what most of us do 90% of our time. We're only on those vacations a couple weeks a year, if that.
Right. And you said you want to bring that vision of health. I feel like there's so many different definitions of what meets the standard of healthy. What are your nutrition philosophies?
Yeah, so we have such simple philosophies because we want people to remember them. And one of our main philosophies is really just focus and do one thing at a time. And that is so critical. We used to call that in our business strategy consultant, there was a fun term and it was called go slow to go fast. And inevitably, we would be facilitating a workshop about an organization's strategy. And you can just imagine it. They have these flip chart papers and everybody is writing up initiatives. And they end up with, 50 to 100 initiatives. And how can any organization do all of that at once? And so we would tell them, you really need to get laser focused and pick your top, 1 to 3 things to focus on. And it's the same thing in nutrition. There are so many things that you can do, whether it's from an eating standpoint or a physical or, just taking deep breaths. So a huge philosophy of ours is just focusing on one thing at a time, getting a system in place and creating a habit, and then going to the next thing. So if we, for instance, look at somebody's food journal and we see what they've eaten for the day, there might be, 15 to 20 things that they could change. But if you told them to do all of those things at once, how overwhelming would that be? And there are people who want to do them all at once. And they want to go out to the grocery store and buy all of the food And then we always discourage that because we see that they've spent all this money on food and supplements and, they've set their alarm early so they can get up and go for a run in the morning. And then it lasts for like 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
So it's such a simple philosophy, but like how it would play out is, let's say we looked at their food journal and there were those 20 to 30 things they could change. We might say, let's focus on one meal and then let's focus on one aspect of that meal. If you're eating the standard American, skim milk and cereal for your breakfast, then how about if we just change that skim milk to full fat milk, even a raw milk? And, or if they say, I can't handle full fat milk, then, why don't we just change that breakfast to something like a hard-boiled egg that you can take with you or an oatmeal, but just changing that one thing and making it a habit. So getting a system in place where that becomes your habit and it becomes easy. You've done it a number of times. You're confident in it. You know where to buy the food in the grocery store or where to get it. And then you move on to the next thing.
Leslie, you make it sound so easy. Tell us, what was it like for you when you were just getting started trying to make some changes to your own diet?
Oh, yeah. So, I fell into the trap of do everything at once. And sometimes I feel that we teach exactly what we need to learn ourselves. So we feel so blessed to have these jobs because I always have to learn. I'm one of those people who could easily have a 3-page long to-do list instead of the top 2 things I need to do that day. So I was a vegetarian and I was literally eating probably the opposite of the Wise Tradition diet. Fortunately, I was eating a lot of vegetables, but other than that, no fat, just not a lot of nutrient-dense food. And I got sick and I knew that I needed to make some changes and I knew that I wanted to switch over to the Wise Tradition diet. But that's super overwhelming. That's changing from low fat to full fat and understanding what kind of meat to buy and what are the best eggs and what to do with your grains and what grains to eat and et cetera. You know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I was literally paralyzed. I mean, one of the main things I wanted to do was just order food from a farm. And it's actually super easy with the chapters and with the information on the Weston A. Price website. It is such an easy thing to do. But because I had all these other things in my head and didn't sort of pick that one thing, it took me like 9 months to just put in my first order. And then after I did it, I realized, wow, that was easy. And I had to step back and think, this is really about doing one thing at a time and getting that system in place and making it super easy so it's a habit. So every Wednesday now I order my farm food and then I pick it up the next week. And then adding that next thing you want to do to fix your nutrition.
I think this makes it so doable. For me, I did the same thing. I picked one element of my diet that I was going to switch, and I tried to just focus on that for the year. I guess I was a slow mover, but literally 1 year was the year of butter, and 1 year was the year of eliminating processed foods in my cabinets. And little by little, I got there. And now, like you, I'm ordering my farm food and really nourishing myself and my family in a deep way. Hey, a minute ago, also before we started recording, you told me a story about swimming. How does that relate to the concept of picking one thing at a time?
Yeah, so it's so similar. And what I've realized is not only in health and in strategy consulting, but in swimming and even in my daughter's violin class, all this whole focus, this mentality of focus and do one thing at a time is how we're successful. So years ago, I was in a master's swimming class, and that's basically swimming for adults. And you have a coach, and typically they'll have like 4 or 5 coaches that rotate through. So one day I was swimming, and the coach told me, stopped me and said, these are the things you need to change. And they gave me about 5 different things, change your kick, change the way your fingertips go into the water, change how, your arms coming up, change your drag in the swim. And so as I'm swimming, I'm trying to keep it all in my head, and I'm thinking, okay, kick, arms, I couldn't do it very well. Yeah. Although I knew I needed to change all of those things to be better and more efficient swimmer. And then the next day, actually, I had a different coach. And this coach kind of stopped and looked And clearly, she prioritized sort of what was the key, what was the most important thing that day.
Mm-hmm.
And she just said, just do this differently for your kick. And it was amazing how much faster I was, how more efficient my swimming was. And then I was able to, incorporate the other things as we went, but just being able to focus. And I'm sure there are other aspects of your life and in all of our lives where we realize, oh my gosh, if I can just focus on that one thing, I do it so much better.
Yeah, I love that. In the second half of the program, you'll learn how a little bit of planning when it comes to your food choices can go a long way. We want to pause now and thank our sponsors. New Trends Publishing. Have you seen the Nourishing Traditions Cookbook for Children? The kids in your family are going to love this spiral-bound, fully illustrated version of Nourishing Traditions. They'll learn how to make everything from crispy nuts to friendly ferments. It's available at bookstores, online booksellers, and of course at newtrendspublishing.com. And if you decide to go big, keep in mind that case orders are 50% off at newtrendspublishing.com. And Just Thrive Probiotic and Antioxidant. Most probiotic pills just pass through our bodies without achieving the desired effect. Microbiologist Kiran Krishnan recommends a spore-based probiotic like Just Thrive Probiotic. Just Thrive is the first 100% spore-forming probiotic that arrives alive in the intestines naturally. It supports optimal gut health, digestive health, immune health, and delivers antioxidants. It's great for adults, kids, the whole family. The probiotic everyone's talking about. Just Thrive Probiotic and Antioxidant. Visit their website at thriveprobiotic.com. Earlier, you were talking about getting a system in place, and I have to admit, I'm not a very organized person. So when I hear about systematizing or planning in advance, it intimidates me. What would you say to the person who feels that way as well?
This is Susana. I love your idea of the year of the butter or the year of the no processed foods. And those are huge things. And I bet that really worked for you. By doing that for a whole year, you really get that in place. And that sticks. And we had one client who would have really long workshops. She was like a trainer and presenter, and she would stand up, get up early in the morning, prepare, and stand in front of a room all day for 8 hours. And then when she would be done, she would be so exhausted. And she realized she was just completely dehydrated. Oh. And so, super simple thing. She would fill up 2 water bottles and bring them with her and put them in front of her on her desk at the morning and kind of keep her eye on them throughout the day, and knew she needed to get that water in. And it's not some crazy amount of water where you have to drink some percentage of your body weight. It's just, we all need to have fluid. So It was just such a simple little system. And I think it just made her feel better. It gave her a lot of confidence about how she was treating herself. And it wasn't just all about the presentation, and it wasn't all about work. It was just a teeny tiny bit of her day that was about taking care of herself and putting those 2 bottles out in front and making sure she got some, nourishment. And she said she would feel less tired at the end of the day. And then gradually, once she got that in place, then we worked on the next thing, and it became about packing a snack. But it wasn't until she had the water in place. And, we first started working with this. It was a company, and she was one of the leaders. We gave them some really robust workshop and program.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's not so much about having this super intricate system in place so much as being intentional about your choices and maybe making one intentional choice ahead of time, like this woman with the water bottles.
Exactly. And once you have just that one success, it gives you confidence and gives you a little mini system in place to start the next thing.
So your Wellworks programs, how do they relate to this philosophy of go slow to go fast?
Well, it's funny, Hilda, when Leslie and I first started, like I mentioned, we're both sort of Washington, D.C. strategy consultants and maybe go a little overboard sometimes. So for our very first workshops, I have to say we did an amazing job, but we probably went too far. We created really elaborate recipe books and meal plans and guidelines and instructions, and it looked beautiful without a doubt. But we learned over time that it was really too much. And we gradually learned that what was much more effective for our clients and for companies that wanted to make changes was to introduce, like we keep saying, and I know it sounds redundant, but smaller, simpler programs. And so we ended up where we would say, here's one or two things to do this week, and then we'll meet back with you again next week with your one or two things. But it took us a little bit of time and practice and even though we knew that, and that was like, go slow to go fast. We've been saying it to our clients for a year. It's still a really tough lesson to learn.
Yeah, I think as a lot of health coaches fall into that, where you're so excited about the information, you want to kind of do the fire hose and give people everything under the sun. You want to tell them everything you know. And, as Susana said, we figured that out. Actually, they asked us to do something really short and simple over the summer. Uh-huh. And we were kind of doubting ourselves, thinking, gosh, they're going to pay for this workshop. It's just so basic. We're just basically focusing on like two things. And they had major transformation. And it's the same people that we had done the more robust workshop for, and they had incremental change. So that's when we realized, we need to, really ratchet back our programs. And they may never get all the information we've learned in their whole lifetime, but that's okay. As long as they're making one positive change at the end of every workshop, then we feel like we've been a success.
And maybe one way to look at it too is if you go slowly, it's going to be more sustainable. If I try to do a radical overhaul of all my patterns, I would probably fail and then get discouraged and just want to quit, right?
Exactly.
So you keep doing these Wellworks programs. And what other philosophies do you have that inform how you approach things?
So another philosophy we call run your own race and guilt is not invited. And as we mentioned, so we do in-person and online programs. And when we were doing the in-person programs, we would walk into the organization and people started hiding their food or confessing to us, I had a cookie, at lunch. And we felt like the big nutrition police. And we were so taken back because we wanted to be seen as these cool health coaches, who were like all understanding and zen. And people were, ashamed around us of what they had eaten, which is the exact opposite. And so we created this sort of philosophy, which is run your own race and guilt is not invited. I'll let Susana talk to you about the first part, the run your own race.
Yeah. So I was telling Leslie that I'm in a running club and I had actually hurt my knee. And so I really knew I needed to take it easy and kind of just, walk a little bit more, go a little bit slower. And I'm not like a big runner, but initially I had been running in the faster group within the club. And it really was killing me to go with the slower group and to not keep up. And so it really made me see how how our clients feel. I really had to do what was best for me and not be comparing myself to the other runners. Because every time I would join back in with them, I would literally, be limping around. And I thought, gosh, what is wrong with my ego? So, that's just something we really tell our people, it's not about what someone else is eating. It's not about making us happy. I'll run into clients sometimes and they'll say, oh, you'll be so happy. You'll be so proud of me. I had oatmeal for breakfast, or, I had eggs and I didn't have a donut. And I am happy for them if they're happy, but it really is something where they have to feel good about it for themselves. It's not about trying to make someone else happy.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so the guilt part of that, guilt is not invited to any of our programs or any of our online chats or any of our one-on-one sessions. Guilt is something that we have in the past. We all grew up with this diet mentality and count your calories and weigh your food. And, you need to have more willpower. And what we realized is that's exactly the opposite of what helps people be healthy. And it actually causes people a lot of times to have a downward spiral because they're so guilty and they're feeling so bad about what they've put in their mouth. And so we tell people that we do want mindfulness and we encourage and try and teach people what that means. So like an example would be if you find yourself in a situation where you don't have any snack and your only choice is the Cheetos in the vending machine, just stopping and saying, I didn't have time to pack my snack this morning. I'm starving. I'm just going to eat these Cheetos. And being mindful about it, however, not allowing guilt to seep in. And Other times, actually, just really choosing a food that maybe you know isn't the best for you and might not make you feel the best, but understanding that that's a choice because maybe it's somebody's birthday and you want to enjoy their birthday cake, or it's a cultural tradition in your family to eat certain foods and you want to enjoy those. And, trying to live your life in that 80-20 where 80% of the time you're doing your best, but that 20% of the time, guilt isn't part of the equation. It's all about just learning how you might do things differently if that's your choice and being mindful, but not being guilty.
Hilda, you said this when we spoke before, and I really liked it because I always feel the same way as when people say, oh, I had a cheat day, or, oh, I'm going to cheat and eat this. That always kind of puts me off guard a little bit because I never think of it that way. I often will make a choice to eat something that I know isn't going to, give me energy and revitalize me. But, I'm having a good time having margaritas and chips with a friend sometimes. And that's just what you do. And percent of the time, I love to eat really healthy food and nourishing food and fresh food. And it makes me feel happy and good. But it also makes me feel really good to have fun with friends and eat a little bit different, but I never have guilt about it. And when we don't think about it as cheating.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, because I feel like part of good health is enjoying this life. Like, what good is it to eat super clean or super strict, if you will, if you're, uptight and unhappy? And there's actually a term for people who get too into this. Sometimes it's called orthorexia. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Where they are so obsessed with eating a certain way. And we advocate, with the Wise Traditions diet, everything is on the table. But I really like your philosophy about like not worrying if you make a choice that's different one day and just moving on and thinking maybe I'll plan ahead next time, but not beating yourself up because guilt has no place in a very healthy and positive lifestyle.
I was at a cocktail party last weekend, and I guess I thought there would be more food there. And when I got there, the only food there was desserts, like sweets, brownies, cookies, things like that. And there were several people there that were clients of mine, health coaching clients. And my husband joked with me because I was eating a plate of brownies. Like I was starving when I showed up. I didn't plan well at all. And he goes, don't eat all that. It's bad for business. And I said, oh my gosh, I almost think of it the opposite. It's good for business. Nobody wants to be with a health coach and be around someone who is judging what they eat or making them feel bad, or I don't want to be the, Debbie Downer at the party who can't have a brownie. I mean, it's just, so anyway.
That's great. I love it. It's good for business. That's funny. I agree with you. Hey, well, we're going to have to start wrapping up. I often ask at the end of the episode, if the listener could only do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
Well, when Leslie and I started our company, we named it the Wellworks Project. And we did that because we really think of our health is so important. It's like our most important project. So we would recommend to the listeners to really think of their health as a project and really be organized and plan ahead. We recommend to the listeners to consider their health their most important project. And it isn't something that just happens. It does require the planning and organization that we apply to our work and our business, and to think of it as a project.
Interesting. What about you, Leslie? What would you say?
Well, I agree with that. I mean, I think that somehow we just take for granted that eating healthy or eating food should be fast and quick and convenient. And it's something that we never have to think about. And I think that as a society, we need to get away from that. And so, when you say the word project, maybe that doesn't sound so fun, but if you think about planning a vacation, you plan the vacation, it just doesn't happen. You think about where you're going to go, and then you end up having fun on the vacation. And that's just how life works. I mean, anything is planned out that we do. And it's the same with our health. And so I would agree that the first thing is just kind of changing our mentality that we're going to get in the car and head to work and not have a clue about what's going to go in our mouth that whole day. And then also knowing, so for instance, I drove here this morning so I could record this podcast with Susana. And it was one of those mornings where my kids have been sick the past 3 days. I was lucky to actually drop them off at school. And so I left and didn't have a snack. But if I don't have a snack, that means I'll be like 5 hours before I get to eat lunch. And I know my body, and that makes me really tired. So I just happened to I was lucky, and I had 10 extra minutes, and I thought, I'm going to just stop off and get a really quick snack at the store. And I was able to do that. So it's something where if you can't plan, on Sunday nights for the whole week, just sort of always thinking a little bit ahead of time. I don't want to be in that situation where I haven't eaten for 5 hours and I'm starving.
And you're stuck at that point, right? Yeah, you don't want that to happen. So how can you plan ahead?
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I just got enthusiastic. Because I totally got you. I have a little bag of popcorn in my car right now that I made with coconut oil last night because I thought, I'm going to be a long time before I get home and can have lunch. So I was trying to plan ahead so I don't find myself in that difficult situation. Well, you two, I feel like you've given us some really practical tips today for people who want to eat well, maybe the Wise Traditions way, but they're really busy. So I really appreciate you, and we will make sure to let folks know where they can reach you and find out more. Thank you, Leslie and Susana.
Thank you so much
for having us. So much fun.
My guests today were Susana Hill and Leslie Schall. To learn more about the Wellworks Project, their one-on-one health coaching programs, team challenges, and workshops and classes, just go to wellworksproject.com. Or go to the westinaprice.org website where we'll have the links to their website and the highlights from this conversation today. Just click on the Blogs and Podcasts tab and go to the show notes for episode 80. Hey, and thanks to Olivia Stamforth for her help with this week's show notes. And Sarah Fernandez from the Podcast Village. We want to thank her for her diligence in getting these shows out week after week. I appreciate you. Learn more about Podcast Village, by the way, their services for producing and promoting podcasts at podcastvillage.com. Hey, and if you're still listening, check out my new website, holistichilda.com. You can find me on Facebook as well at Holistic Hilda. Follow me on Twitter at Holistic Hilda and Instagram at Holistic_Hilda.
Did you know that there are Weston A. Price Foundation chapters all over the U.S. and around the world? Chapter leaders help you find good food in your area, and some have meetings you can attend. Go to our website, westinaprice.org, and click on Find a Local Chapter to see if there is one near you. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for medical advice.